Hello and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a nice day. It is a beautiful fall day out there for HRM, isn't it? A mix of sun and cloud, a little cool. In fact, Vanessa Veinotte, who is, of course, as always, on the other side of the glass and doing a fantastic job. When I were chatting earlier in the day, and I'm a big fan of the golf shirt, and I think it might be time to start maybe bringing an extra sweater in because it was a little cold this morning. And our building air conditioning, I don't know if yours is like that, but our building air conditioning has like one speed, and it's on. It's not, you have like my vehicle, for instance, I can set the temperature inside there, and the computer brain of the car or the vehicle keeps the temperature at whatever Celsius or whatever Fahrenheit I set it at, right? But the building air conditioning here doesn't do that. It's either on or off, and that's it. And it's on today, and it's a little frigid out there. But anyway, the mix of sun and cloud apparently is going to make way for some more clouds to roll in, and I'm out looking over the harbor, and I'm starting to see that happen now. And it looks like we're going to get some shower activity here over the next day or so. Don't know if it's enough to right the wrongs with regards to your wells or to the dryness of the ground around your properties or out there in the woods, but any little bit of rain will help, right? Well, the Blue Jays are hosting the Red Sox tonight in Toronto, coming off, of course, clinching that playoff berth earlier. I think it was on Sunday, and their magic number now is at 4. So what does that really mean, Dan? Well, I looked it up before I came on the air today because I wanted to be accurate, and the magic number is any number of Toronto wins combined with Yankee losses. Adding up to that number, we'll see the Jays win the American League East for the first time since 2015. I thought it was longer than that, to be quite honest. The years just seem to kind of all jumble together these days, but I thought it was a lot longer than that, but it's not. The Jays can clinch that. I think the earliest they can clinch is tomorrow, if everything goes right. If the Jays win, the Yankees lose, and all that stuff. But I think there's 6 games left in the season, and with the Jays entertaining the Red Sox at Scotiabank tonight, and the Yankees are entertaining the Chicago White Sox tonight, we will, of course, be scoreboard watching, and you will be listening to that broadcast right here on 95.7 News Radio, as always, as we look forward to some postseason baseball here on the radio station. Well, that government is back in business today, isn't it? They are getting this session of the legislature underway. There's bill briefings, and there's all kinds of political speak and talk. But what was said yesterday, and I really want you all to really pay attention to this, right? Because the finance minister said yesterday that this year, the deficit in the budget is going to be $1.2 billion, 70% more than was forecast in February. Just think about that for a minute, right? Somebody sent me some math yesterday, and it's likely accurate. It's about $1,000 for every man, woman, and child in Nova Scotia. There's 1 million people here. It's probably a little bit more than $1,000. There's 1 million people in Nova Scotia who are running a deficit. A deficit of $1.2 billion this fiscal year. So let's take the discussion about the debt I think that we have now, and it's into the $14-15 billion, and we'll put that aside. We argue a lot on this program. Oh, maybe argue is not the right term. We talk about and discuss a lot on this program about government spending and waste and that kind of thing. But just think about what the interest payment is. The interest payment alone is on that deficit. And that's just what a deficit is. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that's just money that they've spent over the budget. $1.2 billion this year. I don't. My experience dealing with budgets and with deficits and debt has been that Nova Scotians and Canadians in general really just they don't understand the enormity of that number, how big a number $1.2 billion is. I don't want you to lose sight of this, because the easiest way, I think, to rein in some of the spending that happens in this province is to just stop paying the banks, right? anyway, it might be something you want to talk about in the open hour today. Dalhousie students have returned to class today. Dal yesterday said that they will not. I don't think it was a surprise to many. Dal said that they will not reimburse students who lost school time due to the lockout strike at the university. They say that they're going to be able to compress the schedule enough to get those hours in before the end of the year. I'm curious what you think about that. We're going to reach out, of course, to the Students' Union a little bit later in the week. But I'm curious yeah, okay, maybe you're going to get the hours in, but is it truly like, well, how much are they going to take away the study break? They said they're not going to do that. Are the classes going to be so compressed? Is all of the curriculum going to get taught? It just, I guess it really shouldn't have surprised me, but I'm kind of disappointed that Dalhousie didn't at least pony up something, maybe a credit for next semester or something. I don't know, but they're not to do that. SMU, of course, we're waiting to hear how those talks went yesterday between the part-time teachers, or part-time faculty, I should say, and the university. And now hearing that there's a strike vote that is going to be underway over at the Mount. So we could have, and maybe even some part-time instructors over at back at Dal. So labor disruptions are abounding in the post-secondary sector here as well. As I mentioned, the provincial legislature is back at work today, and out front of the provincial legislature later today, you will see a protest from the folks over at ACORN, who are going to have a Stop Eviction Rally at 12:15 today. Very pleased to welcome to the program from ACORN, Kwasi Asare. Kwasi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Tell me a little bit about this rally. What are you rallying against?
So we are meeting at the Province House at 12:15 to rally against fixed-term leases. And before anybody asks, what is a fixed-term lease? Basically, it puts the power to evict someone in the landlord's hand. So you sign a lease for a fixed period of time, and whenever the landlord decides, okay, the lease has ended, whether you've been a good tenant or a bad tenant, you have to leave. And this is very dangerous for people because then it's a loophole around the 5% rent cap that expires in December 31st, 2027.
Right, and we've been talking about that quite a bit. Kwasi, we had a conversation in here last Tuesday with the Premier was in the studio, and asked him about fixed-term rents and those leases, and he said that fixed-term leases they're useful, and they give people a chance to rent to those that may not be may not be able to be rented to because of credit or whatever else. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, there is an aspect to that. However, it also can be used like any tool for bad actors to find a way to make more money from the tenants. One, it could also be used so that because the tenant does not want to rock the boat with the landlord because their living situation is so precarious,
right?
They could use that to forego any responsibilities for renovations that they have to do in their building to make sure it's up to code and the tenants can live a dignified life.
Right. Tenants are concerned that if they start to stir it up a little bit, then the landlord will just end their fixed term lease at the end of the deal, and that'll be it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kwasi, you mentioned the rent cap. That's we know is in effect until the end of 27. What do you think is going to happen after that? It could be crazy out there if the rent cap isn't extended and rents are allowed to go wherever they want to go. Yeah,
I mean you already see across the North America, right? Housing is very, very precarious. Like the amount of homeless encampment and house encampment that we see is going up. If we look at our surveys, 35.7% of people who are currently on a fixed-term lease have been evicted from another fixed-term lease. 25% of unhoused people are evicted because of fixed-term leases, right? But to put it in context, in 2021, right in the pandemic, only 6.3% of the renters were evicted from a fixed-term lease. Now that would show a 466% increase. What that means, right, for the listeners is should the rent cap, even though they're finding a way to get past the rent cap with this fixed-term lease loophole, should that come off, any landlord, knowing that the masses of unhoused people will basically can charge any amount. And we believe in ACORN that the way education and healthcare are human rights here in Canada, housing should also be part of it. You can't work if you don't have a house to go to. You can't have security and safety, and you can't even start a family and increase the population of this province or be productive.
Kwasi, I'm hearing from the landlords and from others in the market that the rental market's getting better. There's more apartments available, and that's perhaps seeing a little bit of a decline in rental prices. What are you hearing out on the street?
Yeah, I mean, the county government has put a lot of they've put a lot of their focus on the production of more housing, right? What they call housing stocks. That means more rental places. However, there's a difference between housing and affordable housing.
Right.
Right. What we are seeing all over North America is, there's this housing, but they are getting bought up at a rapid rate by these big rental companies, and they've been put into something called a real estate investment trust. That way, even if the rental property is empty, it's still gaining money on the stock market. But this is what people need to live, right? So one of the things we advocate for is affordable housing, fixing the price of housing to not to the market, but to what people are making and what they can afford.
Right.
The general knowledge was 30% of your income, your monthly income should be spent on your housing. Now we are seeing people who are spending about 70, 80% of their income. That is not sustainable, and that's not good for families all across Canada.
The protest goes today at Province House at 12:15. Kwasi, appreciate your time, sir.
All right, thank you.
That is Kwasi Asare from ACORN as they continue the fight against fixed-term leases. If you listened to our program last Tuesday when the Premier was here, he said that they're useful and give landlords a little more flexibility to rent to people that they may not rent to because of various factors, credit, bad recommendations, those kind of things. So will be interesting to follow that as it works its way through the provincial legislature. We're going to take our very first break here on the program. When we come back, we're going to focus a little bit on that deficit that was announced yesterday, $1.2 billion with a B, billion dollar deficit, a 70% increase from February's estimate in the province of Nova Scotia, $1.2 billion deficit on 1 million people. Devin Drover, the Atlantic Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, will be joining us. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back, and this is the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Yesterday, John Lohr stood up at a news conference and laid out his financial snapshot of the books, the province of Nova Scotia, and like you, I was a little bit shocked at the actual numbers that were coming out of the finance minister yesterday, saying that the Nova Scotia government was going to be $1.2 billion, that's with a B, billion dollars in deficit this year, an increase, I think it was just over $520 million from the last forecast that we had in February. Devin Drover is the Atlantic Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joins me on the phone. Devin, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
My experience, and I said this off the top of the show today, my experience with debt and with deficit stories for the average listener that's out there is just like, yeah, whatever, my tax is going up and I don't care about the other stuff. But this is A, record setting, and B, just to service this kind of debt must be costing Nova Scotia a fortune.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that, this is something we hear about a lot. Why does this matter? And I think when families face higher bills, they cut back. But, when government is doing the opposite, it leads to just higher taxes in the future or service cuts. So if you look at the interest payments just this year alone, we're looking at about $909 million in interest charges that the government has to pay this year. That's about $842 for every Nova Scotian. So that's money that, isn't going towards healthcare. It's not going towards education. It's not going towards tax relief. That's just, the first $842 the Nova Scotians paying in taxes in the province is just going on servicing this debt. And now we're seeing this record deficit of $1.2 billion. And it comes at the same time where debt over the last year, even though the government, yesterday touted that they did run a surplus last year, total debt actually still went up $1.74 billion last year. So, it's a very concerning situation for Nova Scotian taxpayers who are eventually going to either have to deal with higher taxes in the future or higher interest payments, or they're going to have to see service cuts. So it's certainly a disastrous time for the Houston government.
We often hear, that we need to run government more like a business, right? And we hear that we've heard that from the federal level a lot now with Mark Carney in charge. But if this was this couldn't happen in private business because you'd be out of business very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's, there's one example of looking at it like a private business, but even, your own family's budget. Nova Scotia families have to make tough choices when their budgets are stretched. We're calling on Premier Houston to do the same. Taxpayers can't afford more debt right now.
Province has said on a number of different occasions that the extra spending is to fix healthcare. It's to build hospitals and to bring more doctors and to lower wait times and get more people on off the family physician search list. But that's that. I get it, and I think Nova Scotians will understand that we need to spend to get. But this is above and beyond.
Yeah, and I think let's look at the facts on that. Government spending has grown about $4 billion in 5 years. I understand Premier Houston in his initial election campaign was campaigning on spending more to fix healthcare. But 2/3 of the new spending in Nova Scotia since Houston was elected is not on healthcare. So that other third of new spending is on other metrics as government just generally grows. And one of the things we've been talking about and advocating for in our pre-budget submissions, and I suspect we'll be doing the same this fall when the pre-budget season opens, is rolling non-healthcare spending back to 2022 levels, which would save taxpayers about $811 million next year. So that put the province closer to a surplus. It wouldn't completely get there. But, rolling back just to the 2022 levels would get us, 2/3 of the way there, and would provide an opportunity then to look at other areas of wasteful spending as well.
Devin, during the election campaign and during his first few weeks in office, the Premier said that they're reduced or going to reduce HST. He took the tolls off the bridges. Is any of this having an impact on this deficit, or was that already budgeted for?
Yeah, I mean, so the update yesterday was a lot of it was healthcare spending, though there was a reduced amount that they anticipated would come from from HST that they didn't get there because of lower economic opportunity or lower economic activity, rather.
Right.
But, I think there's other ways. I always use the analogy you can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. I think there's an opportunity for the province to deliver tax cuts to Nova Scotians who need it while still focused on getting wasteful spending under control. We look at Newfoundland and Labrador, for example. In 2020, they had an economic recovery team put together a report that showed $3.6 billion in savings that the Newfoundland and Labrador government could cut there. I think we need to do the same thing in Nova Scotia. We saw the same thing federally in the 90s. Jean Chrétien's government implemented a very thorough review of government spending and found a lot of wasteful spending to cut, and thus return the federal government to balanced budgets. I think Prime Minister Mark Carney is looking to do a similar thing right now. So, I think that there's a way to, walk and chew bubblegum. I think the tax cuts were great for Nova Scotians. They're seeing savings every time they go to, a department store, or making a big purchase. At the same time, I think the government needs to conduct a review of wasteful spending and find ways to not continue to run up the debt and ensure that taxpayers in the future aren't paying for the spending activities of today.
Had a conversation last week with the Premier on the show, and he said that, our economy is in bad shape. Our GDP is the lowest of 60 jurisdictions in North America. Does that weigh into this discussion at all?
Well, I mean, it's, I think the best way to improve economic activity is by cutting taxes. If you look at, we have a very weak economy across the country. And globally. And a lot of that is the fact that we have some of the highest tax burdens in the country. But at the same time, we also have very concerning debt numbers. So, I think there's ways to stimulate the economy through the form of tax cuts. We see it. There's ways to do that. You can look at the fact that the Nova Scotia government gives out significant amounts of corporate welfare to certain businesses over others. So one of the other things we've been calling for is elimination of that kind of corporate welfare, where they're choosing certain winners and losers in the economy to get, taxpayer handouts, and instead replace that with across-the-board business tax cuts. So, all businesses of all sizes in the province can use that savings to create jobs and hopefully spur economic activity. What we can't be doing as a province is just handing out constant handouts and to certain individuals or certain companies, and then run up the government debt, which all taxpayers have to eventually account for.
John Laurie yesterday said that the revenues were dropping off in the province because of a slowing population growth and people not spending as much. That slowing population growth is something that I know the Premier has been working on since he was elected and wants to double our population, but that doesn't appear to be working.
No, I mean, the issue is if you were either a new Canadian or you're a Canadian from another province, why would you want to settle in a province has high tax rates? Yes, the Nova Scotia has a lower has lower tax rates now than some of the neighboring provinces, but you're seeing the same issue in Prince Edward Island. You're seeing the same issue in Newfoundland and Labrador. You're seeing the same issue in Nova Scotia in New Brunswick when it comes to an aging population. I think the best way to make it an attractive place for people to live is to lower taxes and get the cost of living under control. And until they do that, I think you're going to really struggle to attract new people and grow the population in Nova Scotia.
All of this on top of the taxpayer, the one taxpayer that pays all these bills, looking at a major increase in power rates and a 36% increase in water rates. Like, my wallet's getting pretty small, Devin.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's the power rates. I was pleased to see the Premier indicate that he'll intervene in the with respect to the electricity rate hike because, things like that, essentially, the electricity rate hike essentially eliminates the savings that taxpayers got in the budget this year in the form of the HST cut or the increase in the personal exemption. So, it's not good enough just to, increase the cost, save on taxes here and increase on fees here. That's not really giving the relief that Nova Scotians need.
Devin, appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks so much for having me.
Devin Drover is the Atlantic Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Some numbers to let you chew on during the break here for the news. Increase this year of $1.2 billion. That's a deficit, not an increase, a deficit of $1.2 billion. That means we're spending $1.2 billion more than we had budgeted for, an increase of $528 million since February's budget. Now, here's the number you need to really concentrate on, I think. The government said that the total debt that our province is under increased by $1.74 billion this year. Debt interest charges will cost taxpayers $909 million this year. That's $842 per person. So just think about that for a minute. Per person. We're going to take a break. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so focusing on cancer and on some of the initiatives that have been launched both here and across the country with regards to help those that are dealing with the awful disease that is cancer. And hope that you can spend some time with us and as we move forward. We begin today. This article I read in the CBC, on the CBC's website, rather, and it reads, a Nova Scotia clinic is helping to give young cancer patients a better chance to one day have children of their own. Atlantic Fertility now offering fertility preservation to pediatric patients who are about to have chemotherapy or radiation. The facility says it's one of the first in the country to offer this service, which can sometimes involve freezing ovarian or testicular tissues. Dr. Megan Dufton is an embryologist and a lab director at the Halifax clinic and told the CBC that many of the treatments used in dealing with childhood cancers can cause or reduce complete infertility in those patients in their adult years. We're very pleased to welcome to the show today Dr. Megan Dufton. Dr. Dufton, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me today.
So, how does this exactly work particularly with those that are very young? Like, is this essentially are you grabbing tissue and then for lack of a better term, freezing it for later use?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, briefly, how you described that is what we're doing. So, we're either talking about females or males. For females, we're harvesting ovarian tissue through a surgical procedure done by surgeons at the IWK. That tissue is collected in the OR by part of our lab team from Atlantic Fertility, taken back to our facility, processed very carefully, dissected, use some commercially available cryoprotectants that are used in a time-sensitive way. The tissue is applied then to a specific type of carrier device, and then we plunge it in liquid nitrogen at minus 196 degrees to stop all biological processes until we're ready to use it sometime in the future.
How long can you freeze something that is a human tissue?
That's a great question. So we have lots of evidence from frozen sperm, frozen embryos, some from frozen eggs that have been frozen for 30 years or more that undergo thaw process and survive quite well. So it's an extended period of time that we can store these tissues for. So hopefully if the patients are very young when they freeze these tissues, maybe under the age of 5, when they're ready to use them in their 20s or their 30s, this should still be viable at that time for us to warm them up and use them with the current technology at the time.
That was my next question is what's the back end of this? How does it work when it comes time to thaw these?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward with ovarian tissue at this time. It's a well-established procedure. There's hundreds of babies born from this in the U.S. So what happens is typically you might take one ovary, leave the other in place. We freeze strips from the ovary that's been removed. Later, when the patient wants to resume fertility, they can be thawed and returned to the body to hopefully achieve spontaneous ovulation with regular menstrual cycles and conceive on their own. So that's the majority of the live births from it at this point. But other studies are looking at taking that tissue, warming it in the lab, and maturing the eggs within our lab, fertilizing them, culturing them to embryos, and then transferring an embryo to the uterus. I suspect they'll probably become more the way of the future as we get better at maturing eggs in our labs. One of the other things that we can do, if we can't return it to the pelvis area, you can return strips of tissue maybe to the arm and take stimulation medications to stimulate follicles to grow eggs in that tissue in your arm, and then retrieve the eggs from there and grow the eggs the rest of the way, fertilize them in the lab, make embryos, and implant them into the uterus. So there's definitely different options right now for how we use the tissue. And I think, in 25 to 30 years from now, we'll probably have even better mechanisms of using them at that point as this procedure is becoming more and more common. With testicular tissue, we are very young in this field, so there's not a lot of evidence of creating sperm cells in the lab right now using this tissue. More studies looking at returning again to the body, returning normal hormone cycles to produce sperm within the body. But there hasn't been any live births from doing this yet. So definitely a more experimental procedure than what we have to offer for ovarian tissue at this time.
So this isn't for everybody. This is for people that are at risk of becoming infertile because of things like chemotherapy and radiation.
That's exactly right. So that's the population we would use it for. If the patients are old enough that they are comfortable to collect a sperm sample and freeze that, then we would certainly always offer that first. That's long time proven, very useful in creating families later when you're ready to thaw that sperm. So that would always be our first choice at that time, just for thousands of babies that are born from this procedure. Whereas with the testicular tissue, this is more very new technology with not a lot of results at this point.
Now, when I hear new technology, I start to think, oh boy, it's going to be exorbitantly expensive, right, to do this? Is it? Or is it reasonably affordable for somebody to go through this procedure?
Yeah, so fortunately, we are a not-for-profit clinic, so all of our procedures are done at our cost, and we are partnered with the IWK. They also may have some funds available to support families to help with this procedure, but right now the cost is just over $2,000 to freeze testicular tissue.
And obviously, if somebody's very young and you've already described how long these things can stay frozen, with their the question I would have is is it safe? Is it going to be there forever, or what would happen in that case?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our field is relatively young, the field of IVF. It's just over around 45 years old. That was in the birth of the first IVF baby. But we have cryopreserved material even in our clinic that goes back into the early 90s. So there are clinics and cryobanks that have taken charge of maintaining these tissues over time and making sure that the tanks are maintained and that they're topped up with liquid nitrogen weekly and that everything is held accordingly and labeled properly and protected from infectious disease. So I think that's part of our field, and what we do is take care of these tissues. There is a cost to storing these tissues. So the cost at our clinic is $475 a year to cover the cost of liquid nitrogen and the tank that the tissues are stored in and the 24-hour monitoring of those tanks, because we want to make sure they're always safe. But yeah, so, we are committed in our field to making sure that we take care of these precious tissues long term.
Dr. Dufton, if somebody out there is maybe a candidate for this, or maybe something they want more information on, how do we learn more about this?
So the IWK has had a committee that's been preparing for offering these procedures for many years now. They've created fantastic information packages, consent forms for families, because often, this is a family decision. The patients are very young. So if there's anyone that's facing an oncology diagnosis for their child, they can speak to their IWK physician about this, and if it feels right for their family. Appreciate the time. No problem. Thank you for having me.
That is Dr. Megan Dufton, who is is part of this. I guess it's fairly new, right? It's not anything that has been around, at least from the male standpoint there at Atlantic Fertility, and giving options to those that could become infertile because of things like cancer treatments and radiation therapy and chemotherapy. Something to consider, and when you're dealing with that, with all the million other things that you'll have to consider if you have a youngster that is going through a battle with cancer. We've talked about Movember on this program an awful lot. We know it's an event that happens every year, and we know that it's an event that raises money for prostate cancer research, and everybody grows mustaches, and we raise the funds. But what does the fund, or where do the funds go, and what do they fund? Well, we came across this a little bit earlier this week about a Movember project that is helping underserved communities get treatment. And we're going to explore that a little bit after the break, when we connect up with Kris Bennett, the Global Director of Prostate Cancer Health Equity Initiatives at Movember. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. I hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday as we roll through the work week. As I said before the break, we've talked about Movember, the event that happens here in Canada and Nova Scotia every November when people grow mustaches and raise all kinds of money for Prostate Cancer Canada and for research and those kind of things. But we don't hear, well, we hear a little bit, but not a lot about sort of where that money goes. And we came across a release earlier this week that describes where a good portion of that money went into this time around. And some of that money went to Dalhousie University to help communities that are disproportionately affected by prostate cancer and maybe underrepresented when it comes to the medical community. And we're very pleased to welcome to the show to tell us a little bit about what this program is. And that, of course, is the Global Director of Prostate Cancer Health Equity Initiatives at Movember, and that's Kris Bennett. Kris, how are you?
I'm well. Good morning, and thanks for having me, Dan. Appreciate you.
Yeah, we like as I mentioned in the preamble, we talk about Movember a lot, and a lot of money gets raised in Nova Scotia because of that absolutely worthy event, and it's sometimes fun to follow the money, so to speak, to see where it goes, and some of the initiatives that get funded because of it.
Absolutely. So again, one thing to note here is Movember is a leading charity dedicated to changing the face of men's health, because at Movember, we truly believe healthier men are going to mean a healthier world, right? So for us, Movember has invested more than $110 million in prostate cancer research in Canada. A fun fact here is that we're actually the second largest funder after the Canadian government. So what is setting this whole program apart is really that we're intentionally investing in health equity, which means we define health equity as ensuring everyone, regardless of their background, is going to have a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. So that's going to look like us being able to work with organizations and universities like Dalhousie to address systemic inequities that are going to keep Black men, Indigenous men, rural men, LGBTQ plus men from getting timely diagnosis or culturally relevant care. And the fun thing about the $2.1 million that we just recently invested across 6 different Canadian projects, including here at Dalhousie, is that all of this work is really looking to dismantle some of those barriers and improve outcomes where the need is actually the greatest.
It's sometimes, and I've talked about this when we talk about Movember a lot. It's sometimes not a conversation that comes up every day in different, particularly with men and such. When like I say, Movember is great because we all kind of sit around and talk about our prostates. We don't normally do that, right?
Yeah.
So, any communities where access to healthcare isn't as quick and as easy as it may be in some urban areas, that's kind of what you're focusing on here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're talking about all these communities that are disproportionately kind of impacted here. So I'll use Dalhousie's program because it's a perfect example of what health equity actually looks like in action as it relates to all of this. So it's actually a 6-month home-delivered program that's going to provide daily guidance, peer support. So like you were just mentioning, where men are actually sitting there talking about this stuff, and also culturally tailored sessions. So men aren't going to navigate the system alone. Like you just said, oftentimes men sometimes have these conversations with just themselves, right? And this program is actually providing an opportunity to connect them with folks that are going through the same types of things that they are. They've actually already hosted a rural men's conference. They've launched peer groups for LGBTQ plus men, created a rural living cookbook, and also video series. And they've also started a really cool podcast to kind of elevate voices that aren't necessarily always heard. So again, what PCPEF here is genuinely doing is meeting men where they're at and giving survivors those kinds of tools and the community, like you mentioned, that they need to not just live longer, but also healthier and better.
It's and speaking from experience, it's easier to talk about stuff when you're talking to people who are going down the same road, right?
Absolutely. I think one thing that we often hear is that men don't want to talk about health, and I totally refute that. I totally always challenge people with the fact that it's not that men don't necessarily want to talk about health. It's just we don't necessarily always know where we can have those types of conversations, and those types of safe environments haven't necessarily always been cultivated, or the stigma that exists with men talking about health and men just talking about those types of personal things in general. So again, one of the cool things about this program and really what this money that Movember has raised and invested in these types of communities is doing is, creating those types of safe spaces for men to be able to have those types of conversations.
So this is up and running already, and as you mentioned, a couple projects, but I would assume there's more on the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually a global program. So there's 18 total grants globally in multiple different markets outside of Canada. We've got stuff in the U.S., got stuff in Australia, stuff in Ireland, the United Kingdom. But to your point, there are actually 6 other programs that we funded here in Canada. So we're really looking forward to seeing what the kind of work yields and what those results are. But again, this is a really cool program because it really is addressing health equity. And with prostate cancer, health equity is one of those major pieces that does need to be addressed.
All made possible because of the Movember event, and we know as much as we don't want fall to hit, it's coming, and we know that November is just around the corner, and I would imagine gearing up for this year's edition of the fundraiser.
Absolutely. So November 1st is when folks can begin to really get involved. I'd recommend everybody go to Movember.com to kind of check out how you can get involved and what it looks like for yourself to get involved or your community. We welcome absolutely everybody to begin to kind of talk about what men's health looks like, how it impacts their community, and how we can make sure that we are impacting men all across the world to make sure that they're living healthier lives.
And it's easy, right? It's all laid out for you. We've had people here at the radio station go through Movember before, and you get to grow a mustache that is the envy of the world.
Absolutely. Super easy to get involved. And again, much like PC Cut's program, we want to meet people where they're at. So there are multiple different ways to get engaged with Movember. And again, November 1st, it's going to kick off. It's our 19th annual campaign in Canada. And again, we're going to raise funds and awareness for prostate cancer, testicular cancer, mental health, as well as suicide prevention.
Kris, I appreciate your time.
Likewise, I appreciate you, and thanks for having me on.
That's Kris Bennett, the Global Director of Prostate Cancer Health Equity Initiatives over at Movember. It's always good to follow the money, and I hear that from people who say, well, we've raised the X amount of dollars for this and X amount of dollars for that, and where is it going? What are they using it for? And we know that it's a big chunk of it is going to research prostate cancer, which of course is an awful disease. But this is also this portion of that money is going into communities that are underserviced and into community groups that are underserviced, and giving everybody access to the healthcare that they need. I don't think you can say it enough. Events like Movember are super important because men just don't like to talk about their health. And like I said during our interview, they don't sit around at the coffee shop or at the water cooler or wherever they are, at the football game or at the library or wherever they gather and are discussing their prostate health. It just doesn't happen. And having events like Movember that bring this to the forefront and give everybody the ability to learn more about prostate health and prostate cancer and all the other things that Movember has grown into. It really is a worthy and a good event. And I hope that if you know somebody that's going to take part in Movember this year, is going to grow the stash, then I can't grow a stash. It just doesn't happen. I have an excuse for a stash, is what I call it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't take part in it. And besides, we've seen some pretty cool stashes come out of Movember, which is a side bonus benefit of all the money that gets raised for Prostate Cancer Canada. We, of course, are going to stop. Blake is going to update us on what's going on in the world with the news at the top of the hour. And then on the other side of that, we're going to open up those telephone lines. It's time for the Tuesday open hour. There is an awful lot to discuss out there. I'm curious as to your thoughts from the news that we heard yesterday from the provincial government here in Nova Scotia running a $1.2 billion, with a B, $billion deficit. The first $800 and change that you spend that you spend in tax to the province. So when you have a deduction that goes to the province of Nova Scotia for a tax, be it HST, be it on your income, be it wherever, is the first $800 and some odd dollars of that is going just to pay the debt. That's before a doctor's recruited. That's before a hospital is built. That's before provincial highways fixed. 800 and change is going to pay the debt. And that's every man, woman, and child in Nova Scotia. Just think about that when we take the break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show, open hour after the news. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It's time for the open hour. The lines are now open. The number is 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. It was funny. I got an email from somebody yesterday after our rather spirited Counselors on the Hot Seat and open hour yesterday and said, hey, Dan, we're going to start doing an over and under on how many times you roll those numbers every day because you read the numbers an awful lot. But I think that's important. Oh, I think I think it was just in jest. I think they were having some fun, and that's fine. But I think it's important because we try to get to as many callers as we can and get as many new callers on as we can. I may not know the number, right? So whatever the over and under is, if you're taking wagers on it, best of luck. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. I mentioned the debt and the deficit off the end of last segment, and we'll re-mention it again here on this part of the segment. The provincial government yesterday saying that they had a $1.2 billion budget deficit this year, right? And our conversation with the Taxpayers Federation earlier today said that as part of all of that release yesterday of just a incredible amount of numbers, the provincial government said yesterday that they had put an additional $1.47 billion, my mistake, $1.47 billion onto the province's debt. So the interest charge that we pay, that you and I and Vanessa and everybody else pays on the provincial debt this year, $909 million. So if you do the math, it works out to about $842 per person. That's just to pay the interest on the credit card. So think about your budget, right? Think about the money that you have to deal with that comes in and out. I always call paydays just the handover day, right? I'm the middleman. But just think about your budget for a second. If the first $800 a month that you had went just to pay the interest charge on your credit card before you bought groceries, before you paid the car loan, before you paid the power bill, before you paid the water bill, before you put some gas in the tank, if you drive a car, or before you pay your bus fare for the month. Just think about that. And that's what our province is doing right now. The first $842 in tax that you spend every year in Nova Scotia is going to somebody that is lending us money before a doctor's recruited, before a school is built, before a provincial highway's fixed, before we build a hospital, before we pay a teacher. $842 per person in debt. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's go to the phones. We welcome Donna to the show. Donna, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for taking my call. I'll talk quickly because I like to talk a lot. Anyway, it's the same thing as anything. Follow the money. Now, I have a list here of the extra stuff. I watch TV a lot, the news and whatever. And, okay, here's where some of the money's gone in the budget. And the taxpayers are paying it all. $80 million or more was just introduced for the school lunch program. Everybody remembers that. And I don't know if you know or many people know, if your total family income was under $48,000 this year, you filled out a form and you got back $600 per person for the year on your light bill. And there's more schools being built. Plus, because we have so many kids in here now that can't speak English, they have to have more helpers and more people to help them speak English. So that's costing money. Mm-hmm. And then there's money spent on highways, more for mental health facilities.
Right.
And, and Houston spent money to lower doctors and nurses to the province, which we need.
Right.
And then don't forget the government employees need their yearly raise, so that's millions and millions.
Right.
And then also the government gives out, a lot of people don't know this, along with the federal child rebate or whatever it's called, the province gives out money every month to those under a certain income too. Did you know that?
Yeah.
And low-income seniors get tax rebates on their bill, so that all comes out of the taxpayers' money. And then there's also rebates for farmers and wine growers and all that, and that goes up. And all these extra things, you know, they all go up in price every year. And I can see the $500 million. It's not hard to get back. It's just the school lunch program alone is $80 million, and you know that'll probably balloon to $100 million. So it doesn't take long. That's the thing. And a lot of the stuff is going for people in the lower income things, and you know, which is good because it helps those people.
Right.
But we need, some
we
people
need
help.
We need some higher income people. Is that what you're saying, Donna?
Or lower income people.
Yeah, but you said that it's helping people in the lower income, and you said that's a good thing, and I agree. So are you suggesting we need more higher income people in Nova Scotia?
If we can get them,
right.
More doctors and nurses, and people that are work, because a lot of people in the lower thing are not working. They're not paying any taxes, but they're getting all the benefits. That's part of the problem. I mean, if you've got a couple kids, you're getting about $20,000 a year tax-free from the provincial.
$20,000 for a couple kids? Is that how much it is?
It's about $800 a kid.
Wow.
And it's tax-free.
All right, Donna, I appreciate it.
Okay, have a good day.
You too. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Don't know if our numbers are right, but there are a lot of expenses out there. And I think, and I don't want to put words in Donna's mouth, but I think she agreed with a lot of them that we need to recruit doctors. We need to build hospitals. We need to build schools. The school lunch program, I don't know if she's a fan of it, but I think it's important that kids have access to lunch so they can learn properly. That is just my opinion. But that all being said, that all stuff was budgeted for. Right? Came on the budget. When you have a deficit of what they said that the budget was going to be $700 million, that has almost doubled. 70% more than they told us about in February. So all of the things that Donna listed, I get it. They all cost money. But we've spent over and above that. And that stuff was all budgeted for. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Steve is on the line. Steve, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine. How are you today?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I got a bit of a statement and then a question.
Sure.
Listening to all this, and I think that regardless of your political stripe, the current government is doing what they can to improve things, and that costs money. I would argue that the same people who are whining and complaining about an increase in the deficit, of which I'm always against deficit spending, however, we have problems to fix. I would think those same people are likely the ones who are saying we don't want to explore for oil and gas. We don't want to do any mining. We don't. for so long, Nova Scotia seems quite content to be a have-not province or continue to escalate things like property taxes and all the other taxes that these guys invent to get money. I think a lot of it could be solved with a little bit of understanding, like, what can compact nuclear do for you? Like I said, oil and gas exploration.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking to someone who was, complaining about fracking, and he didn't even know what fracking was. Once I explained it to him, he did, but he didn't know what he was talking about. And I just think that Nova Scotia could solve its own problems if it chose to, and people took a little bit of a different view.
Premier said the very same thing, Steve. I had him here last Tuesday, and he said that the GDP, the gross domestic product of Nova Scotia, is the lowest of 60 jurisdictions in North America. That's all the U.S. states and the provinces in Canada that he had data for. We're the very bottom of the list, and said that a project like Wind West, that he's obviously trumpeting, and oil and gas exploration and resource extraction could be the solution to that.
I would agree with that. Obviously, 100%. I mean, not just because I come from an oil and gas background. My wife's a caper. We were always moving here, and the last federal government's distaste for oil and gas caused a crash that cost me a lot of money. But the bottom line of it is Alberta has a certain standard of living. And a lot of that standard of living is based on oil and gas, just like all the money that Quebec gets from Confederation. The $12 billion a year they enjoy is coming from Alberta royalties and oil and gas. So I think we need to look at that. We need to, this is a beautiful place for sure. It's a great place to live if we can get reasonably timed health care. But I think that we really need to look at things like I said, compact nuclear.
I just hope, Stephen, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just hope that if we go down that road and we all the things we just discussed, I just hope that we insulate the province's economy against those big booms and busts, because you were out there when it busted, right, and everything went dark, and that's a scary promise.
It is. I mean, I was out there twice when it busted. So,
right.
It is. I would think that, the people whom we elect to look out for our best interests are the ones that are charged with understanding that. But there also has to be, there also has to be a balance. Right. Doug Ford talking about his protectionist for the auto industry, et cetera. And what we're looking at is, we could bring in, if you're really serious about fixing the climate, even though Canada's a minuscule part of the problem, if you were serious about that, you'd be supportive of allowing BYD Chinese electric vehicles in here. Because you know what? There's no way I can afford to pay $50,000 for a Toyota so I can plug it into the wall, especially not with the price of electricity here. So, Ford is all of Canada is going to potentially pay to support the auto workers in Ontario, because Ford is the squeaky wheel, and that's what appears to be happening. So, I would just suggest you need to be a little bit more open. I lived and went to school in the States and Canada, and I disagree with the tariffs, and I certainly disagree with Mr. Trump on a lot of subjects. But we need to fend for ourselves, and Nova Scotia has to fend for itself. The best way to encourage a child to work is to cut off their allowance, and maybe that's kind of what's got to happen.
Steve, great call. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. There are children of all ages looking at their parents now going, no, don't cut off my allowance. What? We're going to stop and take a break. The open hour will continue on the other side. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in a minute. All right, welcome back. This is the open hour. The lines are open, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Just a point of clarification from one of our listeners named Jason on the one of our callers, I think Donna right off the top, talking about the assistance that's given to lower income people for children. And Jason writes, the maximum monthly provincial assistance that the Nova Scotia government provides per child is $127.08 for each child under 18 years of age, paid as the Nova Scotia Child Benefit or the NSCB. For families with low or modest incomes, and in brackets it reads a full amount to be adjusted for family net income up to $26,000, partial amounts for income between $26,000 and $34,000. So thank you, Jason, for the clarification. I don't have any kids, so I don't know how much that benefit is. So I'm glad that somebody reached out to let us know. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Back to the phones, and we welcome Steve, who sounds like he's on the road. Steve, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. Thanks for taking my call. I was a little appalled by Donna's comment there. We need to grow our tax base, and heaven forbid if we get some immigrants in here and they can't speak our language. To grow the tax base will help us all. But what my comment is we got this huge deficit, but and I'm a fan of Mr. Houston. I think he's done a really good job so far, but he reduces the provincial sales tax by 1%.
Yep.
How many millions of dollars is that? Takes the tolls off the bridges. What's that revenue worth annually?
Yep.
So at the end of the day, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the last caller's point, about exploring our natural resources and other avenues to increase our GDP. That's what we have to do. We might have to swallow a tough pill and allow uranium exploration or some other thing that may not be wildly popular. Of course, nobody wants it in their backyard, but everyone got their hand out when it comes to everything else.
It's always the tough call, right? Is that people, they want to protect the environment, they want to protect the pristineness of Nova Scotia, but on the other side of it, we're running a $1.2 billion deficit. Like the coffers are dry.
Yeah, to the Premier's point, if we've got the lowest GDP out of 60 out of all the measurable, whatever the number is,
60 jurisdictions, right? In North America, 60.
Right, that's a pretty scary number, right? When you look at the aging population that we have here, you got people going out west to work,
right?
And there's more. We got all kinds of natural resources off our coast. I'm sure there's all kinds of natural resources within the province itself, whether it be precious metals or other metals and whatnot. We gotta take our head out of the sand and get with the times. Otherwise, every time there's an ebb and flow of whether it be tariffs or whatever else the case may be, we're so susceptible and vulnerable that we're not doing anything to help ourselves.
Steve, appreciate the call. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Michael, haven't heard from you in a while.
How you doing, Dave?
I am doing well, sir. What's on your mind today?
I know you haven't heard from me. I've been a little down in the bone docks. But I'm back up now, and the thing that gave me enough energy to get my strength back was...
Good to hear, Michael. It's always good to hear your voice. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Oh, yes. Listen, if you don't take part, Dave, you shouldn't open your mouth. Simple as that. But then the reason I call that American ambassador,
right,
sticking his head over the fence, you shouldn't be calling down our poor America. What are we supposed to do? They made fun of our prime minister. They made fun of our nation as a whole. Where are these guys living at? You know what they should do with him? Turn him around and give him a hard boot in the arse. Say, now you go back to Babylon and clean up that mess you got down here. And don't worry, you got us up here. We're quite able to look after ourselves. That's number one. On the financial part of it, then, for the province, how many times have I been on the air here saying, Canada bought and sold, go Google it. Go Google. I preach to the people. But don't worry, Dan. If there's any shortage of money, let them yell war tomorrow, and it'll come out of the sky like stars. The money. Don't ever fear we're going to run out of money because we won't. And in the meantime, tell that ambassador to the States, stay where he's at and clean up his own little village. to stop worrying about Canada. Talk to you later.
Appreciate it and hope you feel better, Michael. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The open hour will continue after the news. $1.2 billion deficit. And did you see what Canada's public safety minister said about the gun buyback program? We'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in a minute. Welcome back. This is the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. Hope you're having a nice day. Hope it's you're going to get out there and enjoy it because it looks like it's going to get a little bit wet later in the day today. So if you have stuff to do outside, might want to get that stuff done early so that you don't get rained on because fall rain is cold rain, isn't it? It's always just so chilly. Anyway, we're having a conversation today on yesterday's, can I call it a bombshell? I don't know if I think that word gets used too much, but I think it was shocking, at least to me it was shocking, that the provincial government is forecasting a $1.2 billion deficit this fiscal year. Back in February, the finance minister had said that we would be looking at somewhere around, I don't know, $500 million in deficit, which is a lot of money, right? But yesterday, that is ballooned by about 70% to $1.2 billion. Also, the finance minister said that we have added to our debt $1.74 billion. These numbers are so large, I don't think people really understand how big they are. But anyway, breaking that down, $909 million a year gets sent to a bank or a lender who lends the province money. $842 in tax that you pay, that Vanessa pays, that I pay, that everybody pays. That first $842 goes directly to service the debt. Nothing else goes into a line item on a balance sheet at some big bank or some lending institution, and they get richer. Your thoughts on it? 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Bernie to the program. Bernie, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. How you doing?
Good. It's on your mind.
Listen, Dan, I always bothered me that for all this debt that the country owes,
right,
and all the interest payments that are paid, billions of dollars a year, why don't these lenders give the provinces and the government of Canada a break?
Why would they?
Put some of that their interest towards the principal.
Why would they?
Who is this debt all owed to?
But they're
making all this money. I mean, they're living in Fantasy Island. They're raking in about $43 billion a year in debt, and the principal is not being touched.
Nope.
So what I can understand is why they don't give the Canadian government and the provinces a break on the debt relief.
Well, I think they're in the business to make money, Bernie. I think that's what they do.
I know, but who is it?
Well, that's just it. I don't know who the lending institution is.
How much money did they make it? They're making billions.
But we're borrowing it, Bernie. That's the bottom line is the bottom line is that we're borrowing it, right? We just keep going back to the lenders and borrowing more money.
Yeah, I know that. I realize that. But the thing is we got to run a country,
right,
and the people of the country are all susceptible to the debt level, everything. Why don't they give them a break of bad debt? Give them a break on the interest.
Maybe there's a friendly banker out there. I don't know, Bernie.
I know it's a banker or whoever it is, but they should get to the bottom of who all that debt is owed to.
Bernie,
okay?
Appreciate the call, sir.
Okay, bye.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801. You can't. Can you blame the lenders? I mean, they're offering a service to the province or to the feds or to whatever entity is borrowing the money, right? And we keep going back to the trough and borrowing more and adding to that debt. I hear that argument a lot. That who do we owe the money to? Well, somebody has handed over the cash. I don't know if there's a bank or a lending agency or where they get this money from, but the danger is that if our debt gets too far out of control, and I don't know what that number is, then our credit rating in the province starts to shrink, right? And then it costs more to borrow money. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Eric to the program. Eric, how are you?
I'm very well, Dan. How are you?
I'm okay.
Dan, I was listening to yesterday the counselors on the hot seat,
yep,
and they were talking about bike lanes. I just have to wonder. There was a gentleman on your program, I think when Todd, before he went on vacation, and he was talking about the homeless situation in Halifax. So the homeless situation in Halifax, he said, was about the same size as the municipality of Mahone Bay.
Yeah, it's about 1,100 people, I think, the last number I saw.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this $100 million. Now, I think we're all cognizant of the fact that we need sheet metal workers, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need drivers, we need everything. And so, but this gentleman said about 30% of the unfortunate souls that are out sleeping rough are addicts. The other 70% aren't. Now,
no, they're working.
I have no way of. Yeah, and they're working poor and they can't afford anything. So they can't afford to live. That's what the gentleman said. Right. So I'm wondering if you took that $100 million and we'll say we took $85 million of it and opened up trade schools so these people could get skills, and then they could maybe make that magic $30 an hour, which is a livable income, because then they would be qualified to have the trades, and the trades pay very well. And then with the poor people that are addicts, and I know what that's like. I had a brother that committed suicide because of addiction, and some people can be helped and some can't. But half of those people could be helped, and then the other half, it may take a long period of time to rehabilitate them, but they could do it. So when I hear people talking about $100 million on bike lanes, and by driving bikes they think they're going to save the planet, I get very irritated at that because there's not a proper prioritization of money as far as I'm concerned. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was pedestrian safety. Look, I see this more and more and more, and it's happened to me a few times. It happened to me twice this morning. I'd be about 10 car lengths away from a crosswalk, let's say, or 15, and somebody will walk up, press the button, and walk, not thinking if that person driving is a little bit distracted or how many car lengths it takes to stop. I really don't understand, Dan. I'd like to get your thought in this. Why can't the law be you're not allowed to move off the sidewalk until the oncoming car has come to a complete stop? Because what happens, I'm telling you, man, they press the button, they're chewing gum, got the earphones in, and they're looking at their phone. They press the button and walk.
I've seen it, Eric. I've absolutely seen that, and I see it quite often. And you're right. It would be, I think, maybe something that could be looked at moving down the lines, because we know that the pedestrian has the outset right of way. That's in the Highway Traffic Act and has been forever. But when I'm out walking on the street, I'm always, I work under the impression that everybody's trying to hit me with a car. So right? So you have to. I get it, and I understand that pedestrians have the right of way. I really do. But you also have to keep in mind your own safety, right?
Yeah, you're not going to win with a car. That's for sure.
Car's going to win every time.
And about the $100 million, what do you think about that being prioritized to help people? I know it's a tough question. But
it is a tough question, Eric, and I appreciate you raising it. Putting people into trade schools might help the situation 2 years from now when they graduate and they get that job at $30 an hour. But what do we do for those 2 years while they're in school? Right? They're still going to be in that tent, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Anyway, appreciate it, sir.
Thank you very much.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's get back to the phones. Everybody's busy today. Tim, how are you?
Morning, Dad. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind, sir?
Good. Well, this enormous debt that was announced yesterday.
Right.
Unbelievable. And that's the projected. That's not the firm number, but what the projected 1.2 billion would be today may be completely different and will be completely different in 2 or 5 years. The concern is the compounded interest and what that looks like for the youth that's going to eventually inherit this province.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I'm not sure Mr. Houston has the responsibility and the accountability to run the province. There has to be negligence somewhere, and I think there should be a complete overhaul of every department in the province to see what our needs and wants are, because if we don't get this under wraps, we're going to soon be borrowing at a much higher rate. And as you mentioned earlier, that's just going to be worse for people to inherit the debt. Absolutely embarrassing and unfortunate, but I'm not sure what the answer is, but somebody has to start providing answers, because if not, at what point do we ask for them to be responsible and accountable?
Tim, it's been my experience, and I've been doing this for a while now, that when these numbers come out, people just don't comprehend how big they are. And the bottom line is if their tax rate or their taxes don't go up, they just don't care. And I think that, by doing stuff like we're doing today and really focusing and talking about it, I think that gets the groundswell working at the grassroots, right? And that's the only way that we're going to get this fixed, is if people start complaining about it.
And you may be right. I mean, I know I'm paying roughly about $3,000 a year for municipal taxes. Yep. On top of it's at some point, where's the money going? And as I've said before, you have to define what your needs and what your wants are. We can't have everything. So somebody has to be elected to make tough decisions. And I'm not sure collectively if the powers to be currently have the ability or the will to make tough decisions. And that's truly unfortunate, because $1.2 billion today, maybe $2 billion in a couple of years. And that's truly unfortunate, because at some point somebody's going to take the reins and go, we've got absolutely no money, and anything we're going to borrow at a much higher rate, which is only going to cost more. So, people should be outraged. We'll see what happens.
Tim, I appreciate it.
Thanks.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The open hour continues after the break. All right, welcome back. The open hour continues. Email from Colin. Colin says, hey, Dan, provincial and federal borrowing isn't like you and me borrowing. Governments borrow money by issuing bonds. The bonds are bought by all kinds of things, investment funds and pension funds and banks and governments and regular investors and so on. It's not like the province of Nova Scotia goes to RBC and asks for $1 billion. That's why, contrary to what the caller said, that we had a couple of calls before, who said we should seek interest relief, there's no one lender to seek relief from. Our debt is an investment tool, and that we pay the interest on bonds that are sold on the market. If we fail to pay out the interest, that's when our credit rating takes a hit, just like when we fail to make the credit card payment, right? And buying our bonds becomes riskier for investors. Again, that one is from Colin. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Cheryl to the program. Cheryl, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind today?
Well, that email from Colin answered a lot of my questions. I'm just wondering who's lending the money and what interest it's at. But,
so now we know.
Yeah, now we know how our debt servicing works.
Right.
I just wanted to make a comment that I've just been kind of looking up stats since you started the topic, and Nova Scotia doesn't stand too high comparative to other provinces in Canada with its resources, because we've taken such a hit on them over the years, of course, with fishing, and now softwood and minerals and natural gas. But I've always thought that Nova Scotia was missing the mark with tourism. And there's a lot of money to be made in tourism. And I think getting rid of those rail lines and tearing them up and converting everything to rail to trails, it might have, helped the public to have a lot of outside areas to bike and hike and trail run. But I think the rail lines actually could have brought in quite a bit of revenue. There's so many people who are railway nuts who have disposable income from Europe. I mean, the countries in Europe have done quite well keeping the rail lines going.
Right.
And I don't know. I think we just need as a province to think out of the box. If our resources are diminishing and we don't have that revenue coming in, I think we need to sort of, what can work? What can a country or a province do in that situation? But anyway, just food for thought, and I just wanted to throw that in.
Appreciate it, Cheryl.
Okay, bye-bye.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Peter to the show. Peter, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. There's a solution to Nova Scotia's net debt problem, and the Premier's known about it since 2015. We have 3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas locked in the Muscataba Valley.
Yeah, and he talked about that on Tuesday when he was here with us last week and said that that's something that the province is going to explore as part of this whole big project with Wind West and all of that.
Well, the thing is, though, Dan, he's known about it for 10 years.
Right.
He's a little late to the game.
Well, that's just
so the issue is the amount of high-paying jobs and the amount of royalty money that could be coming through that. If when he knew about it, he'd actually taken action. I mean, the Premier right now is talking about a horse that's already left the barn. We have major issues, and he's still looking for consultation. What the province requires is somebody will take a stand and say, look, we have an issue. We have an incredible resource. The world is crying for what we have, and up until now, I've left it locked in the ground. Decisions have to get made, and everybody's not going to be happy with what has to happen. But other than that, you can't continue to have this level of debt.
And I think he's is seizing on the opportunity with our ongoing trade war with the United States to start those discussions again, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing is, talk is always cheap,
right,
Dan. I mean, these talks and assessments and things have been taking place for years and years and years. I mean, 10 years with no action. I mean, rather than have consultation, why doesn't somebody just say, look, we've got a 60-day window to come up with a solution, right? I don't care if they put everybody in a room and don't let them out for 60 days. Go and solve the problem.
Yeah, we did that with uranium, Peter, and nobody wanted to do it. They couldn't get a company to come in and do it.
That's because nobody can trust the government to not change the deal midstream on them, Dan.
Yeah, I hear you.
They have a long history of saying, hey, look, great deal, and then 3/4 of the way through the project, the federal government or the provincial government changes the deal midstream, and everybody's sitting there with egg on their face, and then the investors lose their investments.
Wouldn't it be the same with oil and gas or with the gas offshore?
Well,
because the province isn't going to drill that gas. They're going to bring somebody in to do that, right?
True, but rather than I think off the offshore wind farm thing, unless I'm wrong on this, I thought the numbers that we'd be only looking at was something like a 1% royalty. Whereas in natural gas, there's enough money there to not only make Nova Scotia a resource-rich province, that we could be paying down our debt and not be saddled with the tax burden. And the other thing that I look at is if the province is in this kind of trouble, how can we possibly afford to bring in the level of immigration that we're bringing in to people that aren't contributing to the system?
Well, Peter, the finance minister yesterday said the numbers are dropping of people coming into the province, and that's contributing to this increase in the debt. That's what the finance minister said yesterday.
Yeah, but this is the same. These are the same finance ministers who got us in this same pickle. So you have to ask yourself, okay, at what level of competence are these people at? I mean, Tim Houston knew all along that bringing in and allowing the level of immigrations, even though they were imposed on him by the feds, all he had to do was say, no, we're not taking them. I mean, I'll give you an example right now, Don. You look at the number of apartment complexes that are being built in Dartmouth and Halifax right now. No traffic plans, no policing plans, no schooling plans, no busing plans, no water plans, no septic plans, no plans. Just let's build new apartments and pack them with new people. Well, who are the people that are moving in to right now, I think in Dartmouth, there's over 15 cranes. At least 6 I spotted in Halifax. That's 21 new complexes going up.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Somebody must be moving into the province. So who's absorbing the costs?
Fair point. Peter, appreciate it.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The finance minister said it a couple times yesterday during that news conference that one of the reasons why their projections were off in February as compared to now, which was a 70% increase, and he put some of that blame on lower than thought of immigration into the province. So that was part of his argument for this increase in the bottom line. Last word today goes to Wayne. Wayne, how are you?
Good day, sir. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm sitting here right now having that cigar and with my 2 dogs.
There you go, out in the front of the garage, right?
Yep. Before I go on about the counselors yesterday,
sure.
I was up in Bears Lake, and a lady was walking towards me, and I had the two dogs out of the car for a pee break.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the lady, and I said, don't worry, ma'am. I said, these two dogs are very friendly, and they won't bite you. And she looked at me, and she says, your voice sounds familiar. You're the guy that talks on the Todd Veinotte show that sits in your garage and has a cigar and talks to your dogs. And I said, yeah, it's me. Then I introduced her to the two dogs, of course.
And there you go. So you're famous, yeah. Wayne. You're hella famous.
Oh, yeah. And I also have any veteran that's out there listening to me talk.
Right.
It's all about get out and let's talk. Go to the Legion.
Yep.
Go to Canada Connect. Go to wherever. Go out and talk to your buddies and have a chat with them. Don't sit at home and stewing and smoking your brains out and drinking yourself to death or whatever you're doing to try to bury your demons. Get out there and have a chat with
100% agree with you, Wayne. Very quick, we're almost out of time. What's your thoughts on counselors before I have to go?
Every time I hear them guys talk about this $100 million towards the bike lanes,
mm-hmm.
I can sum it up for you. It's called gluttony and greed, and they're a sin. There's no way we should be spending that much money on bike lanes. Have a good day, sir.
Enjoy that cigar, sir.
I will. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you to each and every one of you that took time out of your busy day to dial the numbers and join the show. I truly appreciate it. You make my day every day that you do it. We are going to stop. We're going to take another break, and on the other side of it, the show will continue. Of course, it's time now for Dr. Rob. He's making a return visit after getting preempted by the Premier last week. Dr. Rob will be here to answer your science-related questions. If you have a science question, maybe a space question, maybe a black hole question, Dr. Thacker will be here to answer those for the next hour. Lines are open, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Science Files, after the news. All right, welcome back to the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. It's now time for Science Files. If you have a science-related question for our guest, Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, here is your opportunity. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Dr. Rob, welcome back.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Hang on, we got to get the buttons right. You get the buttons right, Vanessa? Try it again. Hello, Dr. Rob.
It's good to be back.
There
the buttons
you are.
working, the buttons are working. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Vanessa's shaking her head. She's working on it. Anyway, let's let her work on it. Are you there?
3, 2, 1.
There you are.
Yay!
And now we found it. It's weird because literally I had somebody in that spot yesterday talking and it was fine. And today it's different. We call those gremlins. Is that a scientific term, having gremlins in a system?
Funnily enough, gremlins probably is a scientific term in the sense that it's been used in scientific literature.
Right,
in lots of studies. So, you could kind of think of it as a scientific term.
So there you go. We're groundbreaking in the science field here on Science Files today.
So there is a famous story that Stephen Hawking once tried to use goblins in a paper, submitted it, and it came back changed by the editor to observers.
No goblins. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255 is the number. Dr. Rob, I throw things at Dr. Rob and trying to stump him on some occasions, and I know he's
I'm stumpable.
He probably hasn't seen this yet, and we'll talk about the ethics aside, but I read a story this morning that the United States military had moved one of its satellites in orbit to take a look at a British spacecraft that's up there, some 22,000 miles above the Earth.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the physics and the math calculations to move a satellite from orbit to another spot in orbit and not run into all the stuff that's up there in order to take a look at another satellite. Is it complex? Is it a big deal?
Orbital dynamics is quite counterintuitive, and this is one of the amazing things I think actually about. I've said this on the show a few times before, but one of the most incredible things about all of humanity in space is literally the Gemini docking incident, when the whole thing started to spin and Armstrong was able to basically put on a thruster and take the spin down and so on. That's incredible because orbital dynamics are not intuitive for us at all, right? There's issues of losing speed to go up in some circumstances, gaining speed to go down in some circumstances, that just don't fit with what you want to do from a human perspective. And so orbital dynamics, all that said, when it comes to doing things with a computer and nav and a guidance system, that ain't difficult. We can do that, and we've been doing that for a long time. The calculations themselves, once you see the formulae and so on, they're very easily programmed. So it's not very difficult for a computer system to do it, but for a human to do it,
right,
something else.
It's, we're not just talking the four forces that we would deal with on Earth, right? Like thrust and drag and lift and so on. There's none of that up there.
But that's exactly it. This is how I try and explain it to people who are like, I'm really animated about this because I think this is really important. That a lot of the stuff that we've seen about satellites in orbit and wanting to deorbit satellites and capture them, people go, goodness me, how hard is it to go up to something and capture it? Like, really, is it that difficult? And the answer is, it is difficult because imagine that you're standing on ice and you push on something. What happens? If it's a very heavy object and heavier than you actually end up pushing yourself backwards and commit comparatively little momentum to it, right? All of that is happening in space, right? Because the only thing you can push off is your own inertia, right? There is no drag. There is nothing slowing you down. Space is like ice. Right? It is crazy. Once you start spinning, it's incredibly difficult to stop spinning without some kind of counteraction to that, right? And so space maneuvering, right? Again, you can program it all, but it's still a pretty tricky thing to do. And for humans to do it, it's something else.
Is there a requirement? Do people that put stuff up in the orbits have to have the ability to move them? Should there be a collision? Should there be something that or up the potential for a collision, or the orbit gets out of whack, and then you could wipe out a bunch of stuff? I guess my question is all of the stuff, and there's a lot of stuff up there.
Yeah, and it's growing.
And do we have the ability to move it all? Do we have the ability to some of it?
So pretty much. So if you have a craft that loses the capability to do position adjustment, right, then thank you for turning that light off. I felt like it was in the interview.
It's shining the light on you. I'll get the rubber hose next.
And your name is? So anyway, yes, if it loses its ability to maneuver, that is a collision risk. And so those particular spacecraft are known to all of the collision detection systems we have running. Those are based upon radar data and so on. And so most systems, nonetheless, have positional thrusters and can adjust their positions, right? And in fact, when they lose those positions, they become a problem, right, from a collision perspective. So a lot of the challenges that we have with trying to do collision avoidance is literally around the safety margins that we're going to allow, because what happens if we send a command for something to reposition and it doesn't reposition properly, right? So overall, we keep very, very large safety margins. We keep collision probabilities down around, I think it's about the 1 in 1,000 or something like that, which for most people, you try taking 3 10-sided dice and roll 1,000. That hardly ever happens, right? But nonetheless, that is a good safety margin to work with from an engineering perspective.
Is there a body, an entity, an organization, a group that is responsible for monitoring space traffic? Like would be like the Earthbound model would be the air traffic controllers, right? That are keeping an eye on what's going on in their airspace. Is there somebody that's looking after all of this stuff?
Yeah. So for the longest time, the biggest particular group doing that was actually the U.S. Air Force. But now the International Academy of Astronautics has a bunch of people involved in this and so on. And so we do actually now have a system of notifying people when there is a collision possibility and so on, which is much better than it used to be. I think there was always a joke that it was sent by email, right? So now it's actually much better than it was. There was a fairly significant recognition of the fact that there was an issue with space traffic management that was going to get worse a few years ago. So everything moved on to a much more advanced situation. We've got a number of different, for example, radar monitoring stations around the world now as well. So it's a much better place than it was.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Dennis to the program. Dennis, how are you?
Not too bad. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hey.
Hey, I got a question for Dr. Thacker. So a couple of nights ago, I believe it was Saturday night, the night sky was incredibly clear, and I was out on my back deck, and I saw something interesting in the sky, and just wondering your opinion of it. So as I was staring up at the sky and looking at the stars, out of my peripheral vision, I caught a light that got very bright. a lot brighter than the stars that were around it.
Yeah.
And so then I focused on it, and it was quite bright, and then it stayed bright for probably, I would say, 3 to 4 seconds, and then it faded to nothing.
Okay. Yep.
And I've seen shooting stars.
Yep.
I've seen satellites, but this object didn't move across the sky. So I assume it was a shooting star, but its trajectory was probably coming towards me.
Okay.
But it was just a fixed point, and it got really bright, and then it just faded into nothing.
Okay.
And I wonder if there's anything astronomically that happened.
Yeah, I've got an idea. It's got to use a few things that coincide, but I do have an idea. So in general, seeing something suddenly brighten up and then disappear, that's not uncommon. That's a satellite, what we call flare. And so that happens when the sunlight literally bounces off, whether it's a particular surface on the satellite or whatever. That does happen. Iridium flares were the most well-known for that a few years ago. But it does happen, and it happens fairly regularly. So sudden brightening and then dimming, that is possible, right? But the challenge you're saying is, so it didn't seem to be moving. And the only explanation I have for that, which is a reasonable explanation, but it does require a little bit of a coincidence, is the fact that the particular orbit that it was on was inclined to such a degree that, from your perspective, it didn't seem to change very much, or even though it was actually going to come overhead and so on after a period of time. Again, that can happen with the right sort of like angles, as it were, and the position of the trajectory.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah, I just thought the first thing that popped into my mind was Beetlejuice. But I was like, no.
Oh, if Beetlejuice goes pop, I mean, that is going to be all over the news, right? That really will. And in fact, if Beetlejuice goes pop, there's going to be a lot of very upset astronomers as well. Right?
We'll all know about it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Dennis. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. What's the latest on Beetlejuice?
I haven't heard anything much more than the few sort of papers that really were suggesting that, we don't have a very good handle on precisely how long it's going to be until it goes pop. So literally people are saying like a few 100,000 years, possibly at the long end, a few million years, right? It's just very difficult to predict these kind of things because we can't know enough about the interior state to know whether it's ready to go or not.
And how far away is it? I mean, it's going to, like we're talking light years,
Oh,
right?
yeah, we're talking hundreds of light years.
Right.
So we're fine from that perspective. Yeah.
So it's already likely popped. We just
It
haven't
could
seen
have. That's always a possibility, right? But my hunch is that it's probably not going for a while. But if it did go, wow, I said there'll be a lot of upset astronomers. There'll be upset astronomers because for all the ones who want to know about supernovae, a nearby supernovae, and we are due one in our galaxy. That's a really interesting thing, right? We really are due one. If it went off, it would make our skies so bright at night that it would make doing all of the observations of very far away galaxies quite difficult for at least a couple of years. Right?
So it's going to be that bright when it goes.
It would be that bright, yeah.
It'd be one of those events that will go down.
You'd be able to see it during the day.
In lore and history, that these events, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Have we seen something like that before?
Yeah, I mean, there's the Crab Nebula and so on, when that went 1,000 something, when that went off. There's all sorts of historical documents of how amazing it was, yeah.
Can you tell he's looking forward to it? Hopefully that we're still around when it goes.
Well, I'm not holding out for it, if I'm totally honest.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Dr. Rob is here to answer your science questions right after the break. All right, welcome back. It's Tuesday. That means it's time for Science Files. He is Dr. Rob Thacker, here to answer your science-related questions. Rob, let's go right to the phones and we'll get Glenn on the air. Glenn, how are you?
Not too bad. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are we doing?
Good. Your
Great,
question,
thanks.
please.
Good. I got a question for the doctor. I've been seeing a few things on the internet about this 3-eye atlas thing coming in, comet and or spaceship. We don't know. I'm just wondering if Rob knows anything about it that he can enlighten me with.
So, I mean, yeah, I know a little bit about 3-eye atlas. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that my combined knowledge about it is necessarily going to give you anything that hasn't been reported in the news. But the thing that I will put my neck out on that perhaps a journalist wouldn't is to say I think the probability that this is a spacecraft coming at us from a distant solar system is very, very low. Right? I will say that without any concern.
But he didn't say zero.
I didn't say zero because I'm a scientist and I won't, because to say zero would be a matter of faith and I have to be someone who is evidence-based and so on. So the probability is very, very low. So, but it is an amazing object, right? From that perspective alone, it's got a very different mixture of carbon dioxide carbon dioxide dissolved within the water on the comet. That's actually a very different ratio compared to what we've seen in other comets from our particular solar system. So it is very distinct and different. And that's exciting, right? It's literally a comet from another planetary system, right? But the challenge with it is it's zipping through. I mean, we're literally, once it goes past in November, it's off, and we ain't going to see it ever again.
No, and did I hear somewhere that when it comes in, it's going to come in on a plane where it passes a bunch of planets, and then it's going to be behind the sun for a while where planet Earth can't see it. Is that true? Or
that might be true. I mean, it's actually got, like, when you look at the orbits of a lot of comets, they're kind of like they bend around the sun quite a significant amount, whereas this one, because it's going so fast, it's literally going about sort of 2 to 3 times faster than a regular comet. It's really going to zip past on a fairly straight line, comparatively speaking. It is going to be impacted by the sun, but not that much compared to a regular comet. I mean, that's how we know that it isn't coming from the solar system, basically. And so that means that at some point, the sun could well be exactly between us and it. I'd have to literally look up the particular orbital dynamics to give you a straight answer on that.
Yeah, and I also heard somewhere that most comets, when they get close to the sun, the tail comes off to the back. But what I heard was there's a tail off the front. Is that true?
You can get both, right? Because there is this issue that it depends upon the ionic tail and the dust tail. They can point in different directions. That's not uncommon. That happens. And so you're looking at two distinct things happening there. You're going to be determining the particular directions depending upon what the solar wind is doing versus what the material coming off the comet is actually doing as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Appreciate it, Glenn. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Do we know where it's coming from, or is this still a mystery?
I think that's really difficult to do because it's traveling, even though it's traveling fast for a comet, it's still slow in the context of how long it takes to go between one planetary system and another. The other thing you have to do is because it's so slow, I mean, it's taken millions and millions of years to go from where it came from, the last planetary system. Then you have to wind back all the positions of the stars as well, because the stars all go around the sun in basically the sun goes around the center of the galaxy in 225 million years, and all of the other stars are going around at their own speeds with slightly different movements and so on. So all of the sort of calculations you have to do are actually quite tricky because you need to know where things were quite a long time in the past. Now, I wouldn't say this is beyond the possibility to do, right? Certainly, there's probably already people looking at possible candidates for where it might have come from, but because you've got to find presumably a fairly young star system would be my guess. These things there's a lot more energetic things going on early during the development of the planetary system than there is later on. So yeah, it's a little bit of a detective story to figure out where it's most likely to have come from.
Where's it going? Do we know?
Someone will have done that for you, that calculation for us, but it's not going to have any, how can I put it? Now it's going through the gravitational field of the Milky Way. It's just going to go bing, 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 as it gets hit by different gravitational fields. Yeah.
Right, so it's going to bounce around, but no threat to Earth, obviously.
No, none.
None.
Yep.
And when is it going to pass? You said November?
The closest approach is in November, as far as I remember, yeah.
So I imagine that astronomers are a little giddy at this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people have been doing observations of it with big telescopes for some time now, right? And so we'll see more, or we'll get more and more information as it gets closer and closer, but it's between the orbit of Earth and Mars, so it's not really going to be that close to the sun anyway.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Charlie to the program. Charlie, how are you? Charlie, are you there? Hello, Charlie.
Welcome, Charlie, to the program. Charlie, how are you?
You got to turn your radio off, Charlie. You're on. We're going to put you on hold, and then I'll come back to you because your radio is on, and there's a delay.
It's going to be feedback.
And it's and it's going to be confusing as heck. So Vanessa's going to sort you out, and then we'll get right back to you here on the program. But that gives us an opportunity to tell you that there's a number of lines open, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's try Charlie again. Charlie, are you there?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Your question for Dr. Rob, please.
Whatever happened to that car that Musk launched into space?
You want to go and get it? So that's on an orbit, which is quite unusual. It's the elliptical orbit, and it sort of like zips in close towards the sun, and then it goes out past Mars. And so it's going to be on that for some time. I think there's someone has actually done the calculations. There might even be a website you can go to see where it is. But there's a very, very small chance that a long time in the future it might actually come and hit Earth, I think. But it's very small, right? And a long time in the future, right? So it would be quite amusing if it did come back. But yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, maybe you can launch another one with Trump in it.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877.
Well, you can tell I'm not disagreeing with that statement.
I didn't hear any pushback, Rob, at all.
Yeah.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Wouldn't that be something that did come back? I wonder, if
Yeah, I mean, it's a small probability because this all depends upon how it gets pushed around by all of this tiny little forces that just take time to change things over a long period of time.
So the forces in space aren't strong enough to crush a car? I would think that...
No.
So it's...
It's a vacuum, right? It's not going to crush a car, so...
Right, so unless...
I mean, it makes things implode, sure.
Right, but it's not going to crush it.
Or explode, I should say, because it goes boom.
Outside.
Right, yeah.
So you can send up a car and it'd be the glass will
It'll be
stay in
fine.
it.
Yep.
There you go. I didn't know that. I thought there was pressure like it would be in if you're underwater or something.
It's all good. It's all good. No, it's the complete opposite, right? There's no pressure. So as long as you don't need to expand, right, and a metal is just going to be just fine. I mean, we could put all the metal in this studio up in space; it'll be fine.
Just not us,
right? No, we pop.
That's what I was getting
Blood
at.
vessels burst, air comes out of lungs. We don't last very long, basically.
Be a pretty boring talk show.
A few seconds at most, not to mention the fact if we're in a shadow, it's really, really freaking cold.
Right. Canada Goose Park is not going to fix that.
Nope.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Science Files continues after the news. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. It is Science Files. He is Dr. Rob Thacker, and he is here to answer your science-related questions. The telephone numbers are 902-405-6000 or, of course, 1-877-801-8255. We'll go immediately to the phones and welcome Jeremy to the show. Jeremy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Your question for Dr. Rob, please.
Dr. Rob, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good.
That's a very Canadian introduction. How are you? I'm good. Well, I'm good too. Yes.
Good. Yes. I'm an airline pilot, and earlier in my career, I was flying Halifax to Moncton. It was nighttime and a moonless night, so quite dark. Not a lot of cloud cover, and there was a flash. It was green. Not a laser strike, which is what I thought it was at first.
You mean a laser strike on your cockpit?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But this was not that. And it wasn't a flash like lightning. It was a lot slower than that. And at first I thought it was a laser strike, but when I looked forward, I could see that the world was illuminated. You could see the ground. You could see the clouds getting illuminated from the background. The entire world. I was over about Amherst, I would say, on the way to Moncton. So I could see everything for a good 2.5 seconds, which is a lot longer than a flash of lightning, of course. And
sure.
All I can think of is something burning up in the atmosphere, probably. That slower rate.
Yeah. And so the emission spectrum of whatever was burning up would determine what color it was?
Yeah, and that's pretty much what my question is what would go through our atmosphere to burn up to create that dark green, slow flash that would illuminate the entire world for a good 3 seconds.
So the one thing I was going to ask about was whether this, where was it coming from? Was it coming from above you, beneath you?
Well, I couldn't tell where it was. That's the thing.
Okay, so I mean,
all I could see was the entire world around me, outside the cockpit. All of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick being illuminated green for a good 2.5 seconds.
So I'm just wondering whether you might have had what's called sprites, which are auroral discharges, right? So those tend to be a vertical threading of all the electrical emission. And so they're not like the regular aurora that we have, which is sort of like wavy and so on. These are quite sort of like vertical and so on. I don't know what the overall sort of like duration of these are, right? So maybe that could be the issue. But certainly those are things that do happen fairly high up, and so they are generally associated with kind of like lightning discharges as well, right? So I'd be curious. I mean, I don't know whether any data is tracked on how common they are. That's an interesting thing to know about. But that's always a possibility, and one thing I would say, because then that would actually fit with what you were saying in terms of it would light up a large area. And if it did just happen to be behind you or outside your particular field of vision, then you wouldn't necessarily be able to see it.
Now, it was slow, too, remember, like not like a flash of lightning. It was quite slow.
Okay.
Like I said, almost 3 seconds. That's a long time for a flash. So anyway, very interesting. Thank you for the answer.
Appreciate it, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would sort of like go and look it up and see, because there's a lot of stuff written about sprites on, and like there's even, I'm sure there's a Wikipedia page somewhere as well. So that'll give you a sort of good background on it.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, man. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Airline pilots must see all kinds of because they're above the clouds, and we a lot of the stuff that happens we don't see, right?
So in fact, pilots in general are there's a kind of like interesting two things going on, right? The first thing is that they're out there a lot, so they see a lot, so they get to know what's going on in the sky. The flip side is when really strange things happen, who's most likely to see it? Pilots, right? So there's kind of like a filter of all of the things, and in this case, this conversation we just had with Jeremy, right, of all of the things that they do know about, right? And then when there's something that is really rare, then because you trust these people, they're up there and so on, you've got to take it seriously, right? So, yeah.
So what exactly is a sprite like? Is it like Aurora Borealis, just in a different direction kind of thing?
Yeah. So they're really high up, and they are associated with literally. They're caused by having an electrical field in the very high upper atmosphere, which is similar to what we have with an aurora. But then you have a discharge that literally negates that actual difference in polarity between the different parts of the atmosphere. And so what I'm trying to find out, and maybe if the next break, I'll zoom around the internet and try and find out, it's just how long they last for. But I thought they were fairly quickly dissipated. So like Jeremy said, like a couple of seconds, didn't he? So maybe.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Dr. Rob is obviously very plugged in and very curious, and throughout the week he gathers stuff for us to talk about. And one of the things I know that on Wednesdays when Dr. John comes in, we talk about Ozempic and Wegovy and those drugs an awful lot, and about how they work and what they do. But you sent me some new data on these things, and we're starting to learn more about Ozempic and Wegovy. Yeah, so this one is a study on, I think it's like 200 participants or something like that. So it's a reasonable size. And what they've asked them is, does your sense of taste change? And so about 20% of people have said, yes, it does, right? And now the challenge with all of this is there's a thing called the placebo effect, which I'm sure you've talked about. And the placebo effect can be quite strong in certain circumstances, that people, if you ask them about something, are inclined to sort of say, oh, yeah, maybe, just on the basis of the question. So in this particular case, they found that about 20%, which is not small, but it's not absolutely conclusive either, of the participants reported that after taking Wegovy, Ozempic, and so on, they actually had a change in their sense of saltiness and sweetness when they were eating. And so then they also reported in many cases that they would feel literally
satiated much faster in response to that. And so there's sort of theories of, if the food is that much more emotionally satisfying for you, right, will you have a similar response with your actual feelings of fullness as well? And so, but there is no evidence that for these people they actually lost more weight or anything like that. So it could just be that there's some kind of placebo effect maybe. But if it's true that they really do have this different sense of taste, then that's suggestive that actually, Wegovy and Ozempic are impacting other parts of the brain that are related to taste as well as satiation.
Because the drug itself, and I'm obviously not a doctor nor a scientist, no, and I don't play one on TV. That all being said, people that I know that are on these types of drugs tell me that it makes them, their appetite shrinks, right? That's kind of how this whole thing works.
That's exactly how it's meant to work.
So with that coupled with this new revelation that in some people it makes you, that rice cake tastes like a chocolate cake, maybe?
Well, that would be amazing. Anyone who can make rice cakes taste like something that isn't a piece of cardboard, that's a product that's waiting to make millions, right? So, sorry, I tried eating the rice cakes. My partner was all like, have a rice cake for lunch. And I'm like, no, I'll just eat raw cardboard, thank you. Yeah. And so, no, in that case, I think... I've got to be honest, I'm not convinced. I actually think that there could be a factor of some people just having some kind of placebo response here. But, if it really is a factor and that in some people this does get to the sense of taste, I mean, it's obviously presumably not impacting the taste buds directly. It's how they're perceived in the brain. Right. Then, that's interesting. And could we produce better drugs? Although, to be honest, Wegovy and Ozempic seem to work pretty well.
So we've got $1 million idea with the T-shirts that black holes don't suck. And now we're going to try and, you and I are going to work in our basement laboratory to make rice cakes taste like chocolate cake.
Well, a drug that makes rice cakes taste like chocolate cake.
Oh, we're going off the rails on Science Files today. We're going to take a break and try and get things back on the rails. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrand. We're back in a minute.